Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is honored to be presented again this year by Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. For more than 48 years, the Townsend family of dealerships has been a locally owned company built on service and connection with its customers. And their experienced team can walk you through the car buying process side by side, from test drive to service oil changes and beyond. Townsend goes through a rigorous vetting process to make sure that every pre-owned vehicle adheres to quality standards. And right now, there's plenty on the lot to choose from in various makes and models. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Automotive salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. If you've spent time in Charlotte, North Carolina in the last 40 years, Barbara McKay's voice could be as familiar as family. One of the region's most popular media personalities, she taught a generation of viewers to cook through her consistent presence on WBTV. And that's during an era when viewers sat by the television with pad and paper ready to write down the recipes she demonstrated and dictated step by step. She's perhaps best known for her work as co-host from the early 1980s through the mid-90s of the daily noontime show Top of the Day. And then from there, she went on to create, executive produce, and host other lifestyle shows locally, regionally, and nationally. She launched 2 successful magazines in the Charlotte market, one of which saw some of my earliest bylines. And she recently published Coming Home, a combination cookbook and memoir that shares a behind-the-scenes glimpse of a life spent in front of the camera. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Barbara.
I am so excited. I am so honored. I would like to interview you instead of you interviewing
Well,
me.
that's been happening off mic, but I am grateful that you have allowed me to come into your home today and sit with you.
It is my pleasure.
I've only ever seen you through a TV screen, but we have a lot in common.
Uh-oh.
No. It's wonderful. I know your voice more than family members, I believe.
Thank you. Did I help raise you?
A little bit.
Okay, good.
Just a little bit.
Good.
But
Did you love to cook because you watched me all the time?
And Natalie Dupree and Julia Child and my grandmother and my mom.
I am way down low.
I have
on
a
that
company
totem pole.
of women. Yes, that definitely. And Martin Yan. I loved Yan Can Cook. You know, and he just won a Lifetime Achievement Award from the James Beard Foundation.
You have an impressive list of educators.
I do.
I am sorry I even mentioned that.
Well, we're here today to really chat a lifetime of cooking and a lifetime of community building, which is what you've done. And then you've added yourself to that community with telling some of your story in this new cookbook, Coming Home. And My first question that I really just want to get into is, I read that you were a flight attendant and you went in, cold call, walked into the studio to give yourself this job. And I'm just going to say, that's pretty cool. So can you just tell us that story briefly?
I was an obedient child and my mother told me to do that, and I did, and that's where I got the courage. But yes, when I graduated from Chapel Hill, women had basically 3 choices. You could be a teacher or you could be a nurse, and I could not stand the sight of blood. I couldn't do that. Or you could be a flight attendant maybe. So I did 2 of those 3. I was a teacher and a flight attendant, not in that order, flight attendant and a teacher. And then I went home to have a child, and I was in my house rocking my little baby, and my mother walked in, and she was accustomed to a very active little Barbara who was all over the place, flight attendant, teacher. And she saw me and she said, "You have let yourself go. You look terrible. You need to do something with yourself." And she picked up the big Mecklenburg Charlotte phone book and flipped to WBTV and said, "You could do that." And what prompted her to say that is that the TV was on. I think I was watching the soaps. I mean, she was really worried about me. So she stood over me, literally stood over me until I made the call, and I asked for an interview. I went over. Well, first of all, I was shocked they gave me an interview, and it's like, now what do I do? So I went over and I had the interview with Anna Ruffday. I will never forget her name. And she was so kind and so wonderful. And from that point on, this was told to me by the producer of Top of the Day. She said that Anna called her and said, "I have someone I want you to meet." And she said, "Well, how many shows has she hosted and what's the size of her market?" And Anna said, "She danced on TV when she was 6 years old, and that's it. That's all she's ever done." And Kathy, the producer at that time, said, "I don't do that. I do not go talk with people who walk in off the street." And Anna said, "I think you need to talk to this one." They did an audition. And I did not watch television for 6 weeks. I was so embarrassed by what I did. No one, not my immediate family members, except for my mom, no one knew that I had gone over and done that. And then one day, I got this letter. And I was almost afraid to open it. It's like, "Do not ever come near our building again."
You have a restraining order.
Right. And then they said, "Yes, you were not great, but we think there's potential." And I just kept going back, and they kept teaching me how to do it. And then I eventually became the host of that noontime show. And then I did 7 other shows. And then I did regional and then national TV. And that was, thank you, Mom. Listen to your mother. They know best.
Were you a cook at home?
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
So it was always cooking was always a passion for you.
Right. So I started, they started me doing cooking segments. Yes, it was. And that was because, probably like you, I grew up in a family of people who love to cook and a farm family. And actually, I was born in a community of 500 people. And then grew up in a tiny town. We had organic food before organic was cool. Everything came from my grandparents' farms. And then my father had a huge garden. And then he would go on fishing trips and bring back seafood. You will find this interesting being from Charleston. He would work all day in Shelby, all day, get in his car and drive to Charleston and shrimp all night. And that's where I get my energy too, by the way.
Oh, right. That's like 5 hours.
Yes, right. Exactly. I know. So I was accustomed to really good food and both parents and grandparents being great cooks. And I just watched them. And then I knew what good food was. And I wanted to duplicate that.
Well, you have a distinct, approachable, welcoming personality.
You're kind. Thank you.
On air and off. And that is also pretty magic when it comes to teaching people how to cook. And so I think your mom definitely saw something with that. And there has to be a moment where people started responding, right? Can you talk about that feeling of people reaching back to you and how that suddenly you're a public figure, and that's got to be odd, right?
You just gave me chills, because I am one, and this may be true for other television personalities too. I needed that validation. I think probably I'm basically insecure. But when I started getting that feedback, it began to build my confidence of, wow, I think I can do this. And to this day, I love doing book signings, because I get to be with these people. And it's much more than, and I bet this is true for you and other people who love people and love interacting with them and are fascinated by their lives. It's much more than just a validation for me. I am so grateful for their comments, sincerely grateful, and I never take anything for granted. So when they come to see me and tell me that they like my book, and I'm like, really? That is sincere. It is just honest. And that's part of being a TV personality too. You have to be honest. It's like a lie detector test every day. I am real. I am from a small town. I am a people person, and I am most comfortable when I am interacting and hearing about their stories and my sharing my stories. And probably the most gratifying part of this book, unlike the others that I had done, because I did tell my stories, is finding out, and it shocked me so much, that the stories that I told in that were just as meaningful to someone in California or Montana or Oregon that had never known my history. Whereas I expected my wonderful friends, many that I've never met, but we shared time together on TV.
Right.
I expected
and Fred Rogers calls them friends too.
Yes.
Yeah. He would say, these are my friends. And there is a space between the viewer and the television person. And that space is a holy space, because, he was a Presbyterian minister. And he talked about that holy space. And so you would feel that friendship, right?
Yeah, no question. And when it used to drive my children crazy, we'd be walking through the mall, and we had a mission to be there. And
it was the 1980s when the mall was cool.
So thank you. I loved being stopped and interacting with the people, and I've never understood how some superstars lose that. Because without people like us chasing after them, without us, they wouldn't have a job. I welcome it. I love it. I like their stories. I deeply appreciate they spent part of their day with me. And you did, and I hear that you
I definitely
you grew
did.
up watching me. You can go ahead and say that.
That's true. That's true.
I'm old.
It's my birthday. I'm old
Today
too.
is your birthday.
Yes, it is.
Happy birthday.
And well, then you didn't even know you were making me an Elvis Presley pound cake for my birthday. So, that sense of entertaining. I mean, we came in, and that feeling of entertaining is really one of the things that you taught me, of gracious, entertaining. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be there.
Well, that you saw it.
But you just put some nice things out and treat people well. And so, I was shocked. I was like, Barbara McKay made me a pound cake.
Yes, I did. Of course I did.
But
you came to my home and are spending time with me.
Oh, that's great. But it's an Elvis Presley pound cake. So I have to know the story behind this.
And I'm so glad it's your birthday. I will send some home with you.
That sounds wonderful.
When I was 8 years old, my father knew no strangers. We were visiting relatives in Memphis. And so my daddy just pulls up to the gate of Graceland. And remember, I was 8 years old. I didn't really care that much. Unlike 8-year-olds today, I was not into all of the things that they're into now, superstars and all that. I was just an 8-year-old who was kind of ready to get home. But he pulled up to the gate, and Uncle Vester, if you were an Elvis aficionado, you know who Uncle Vester is. Uncle Vester was the gatekeeper. Uncle Vester and my daddy just hit it off like they had known each other forever. And Uncle Vester said, y'all come on in. So Elvis was there, and we sat out under the trees, under these giant trees at Graceland, Graceland is so different now. I loved seeing it and being there and remembering for when I was 8. But Elvis would come by on his motorcycle. He was riding around Graceland on his motorcycle, and he would stop and say hello. And I loved playing with his dog. And in my head, I was thinking, I can't believe that his mom lets him ride his motorcycle on the grass. and then I realized, oh, wait, this is his grass later. But it was just a beautiful, special moment. Mm-hmm. Fast forward, pay attention to those moments, because fast forward many years later, when I was doing television and I was doing movie reviews, I went back to Memphis for Memphis Belle. And part of our being movie reviewers that weekend was a tour of Graceland. And it was so different. It wasn't just...
It wasn't a home.
No,
right.
It wasn't. Trams and gift shops and all of that. But I did go in the gift shop, and there was a cookbook by none other than Uncle Lester. So I bought a cookbook, came home, I started reading it, and I found recipes, and you will relate to this, Stephanie. I thought I really would love to use some of these recipes, but I need to get permission. I mean, This is Elvis Presley's favorite food. And so I didn't use it, and I didn't use it. And a few years later, now we're talking like 30 years now, from when I was 8. A few years later, I was interviewing Priscilla for The Naked Gun. And all of us who were from all the networks and all the television stations around the country were told, you are not to ask a question about Elvis. Do not do that.
And how that works is, because I've interviewed famous people before, notwithstanding you, but you know, that feeling when it's on a junket, you know, I used to be a music writer, and you get 10 minutes and you have to go, and they pop on, and if it's phone, they pop on, or if it's in person, they bring you in, and then there's a handler that will escort you out. So there's just a rotating line of people, right? And it was one of those situations.
Thank you for describing it for everyone, because it's in my head, and you put it in their heads. Thank you. Uh-huh. So yes, so I went in, and before I started, I said, Priscilla, I want to tell you something. And I told her about visiting Graceland when I was a child. This was pre-Priscilla, too. Mm-hmm. So she loved that. We began talking, and she said, ask me about Elvis. Use these phrases and in this question form, and you're fine. And so I got the best interview simply because we had a chance to get to know each other. And then before I left, I said, by the way, I would really love to share Elvis Presley pound cake. It's so good. And she said, you go ahead. You have my permission. So from the time I was 8 until many decades later, that mattered. So people need to pay attention what's going on in your life. It will come back. There's a plan out there. So that's the story of the Elvis Presley pound cake. I've done hundreds of pound cakes on TV. When I'm making one for a special birthday, like yours, it's always the one that I use.
And what makes it so special?
When you read the ingredients, you'll know why it was Elvis's. Mm-hmm. It has 7 eggs in it.
Wow.
Lots of butter and cream. I call it a health food when I think about all the protein in the eggs and the milk.
That's what I'm going to call it.
Call it a health food. And it has this wonderful, because of those ingredients, again, this wonderful crunchy crust on the outside. And then
which is so important in a pound cake.
Oh, yes.
Oh, the crust.
Oh, yes. Yes. I sometimes make, if I have a little bit of batter left, or sometimes I purposely leave some out and make pound cake cookies just by chilling the batter and then putting it on a cookie sheet.
I'm doing that because I love pound cake. That's my...
And you like the outside best too.
Right, for sure. So, what has been one of the most surprising things that has really come to you from a life like in the public sphere, but also in the sharing of yourself? Because like you're saying, I sometimes have that and I'm a little taken aback, you know, that's lovely. And that's why radio is great. Yeah. Podcast is just on-demand radio. It's just old school all over again. But
you are beloved. There's no question. You are beloved.
Thank you. But what is something that's really surprised you?
I guess I'm always surprised when people say something negative, that wasn't true. And they tell it as if it were factual. And that happens with social media sometimes. Now, I will say that is very, very rare for me, and I'm so grateful for that. But I know that my family members have heard things, and I have experienced, I've read things about me, and it's like, what? I mean, just complete fabrications. And that is shocking. But that is such a teeny tiny fraction of a percent. So I don't really dwell on it. I don't know that I've ever even really thought about it or verbalized that until you ask me. So that's more of a shock, not a surprise. I think probably the biggest surprise, because I like to focus on the positive, the biggest surprise is that 44 years and counting, and I'm still doing this, and people still care. And 99.9% of the people out there are so extraordinarily giving and kind. And when I began doing the memoir, the story part of this, a friend of mine said, Barbara, don't be afraid to share the bad as well as the good. And I might not have done that had she not very wisely said, don't be afraid to share the bad. And the only reason I would have hesitated about that is that I would fear that one of those people that had never known me might take that and use it in some way, fabricate it, embellish it, make it something it isn't. But I did that. And I had mentioned earlier, the biggest surprise of the book is that people liked the stories and related to the stories, whether they knew me or had a history with me or not. Everybody out there needs encouragement. They need inspiration, and they need to laugh. That's what I hope to do with these stories. I wanted them to encourage and inspire and entertain. The first thing I say about my book and my life is that food took me on an amazing journey, but my faith got me through it. And throughout my life, all the miracles, all the downsides, we all have a roller coaster life, but my faith was the common thread. That's what got me through it all. And there's a reason for that. And you can read it in the beginning of the book. I had an experience when I was 11 years old that was so traumatic and so difficult. And it took a very long time to find the resilience to overcome that. But wow, it was worth it, because it set me up for the rest of my life. Whatever was going on, I always knew that it was going to be okay.
44 years and counting, and you have more energy than I do. And
No.
oh, I'm sure of that. That's not like a question. So I'm just wondering, what is making you hungry? What's next? What's percolating for Barbara McKay?
Metaphorically, I am hungry for more years of doing what I love. I have been so blessed. You know, so it's no secret, and I guess probably it will not be a secret to these people out there. Now, I've seen my 70th birthday. While I always am grateful because of that early experience, I'm always grateful for every day that comes. Now, I'm just so hungry for more years to make more fun things happen. And the last story, the last page of the stories in my book is what's next. I will always be looking for what's next. I wake up every morning and say, Lord, I can't wait to see what you have in store for me today. And it's an attitude that keeps me energized and young.
What is one aspect of this job that really you created for yourself that really meshes like a puzzle piece with the natural part of your personality?
The people part, the genuine curiosity about the lives of other people, the genuine, sincere care that I would love to make a difference out there. The tiniest things just thrill me. Somebody will come up and say, remember and it's a recipe that I had totally forgotten, or an incident that I had totally forgotten. I might have remembered for 30 minutes and they remembered for 30 years. And they tell me that. And so I just thank God that I was born with this heart for that. I can't take credit for it. I didn't work hard for that. I didn't do anything but be born. And I was given this heart that genuinely cares. And I've got a real heart for animals too. We will talk about that another time. But God gave me this just real caring heart.
Now, I know that you really focus on the positive, and this question really is the other side of life. And that is there something quick fire that I say keeping you up at night right now? So is there something that worries you about the world, your life, the next step, whatever?
The news keeps me awake at night. Seeing people out there who don't feel gratitude and that don't care about other people. And again, it sounds so Pollyanna again, but if they only knew the joy of the interaction that kindness brings, that gratitude brings, no matter what your situation, just be grateful. And look for the good. And I do. I look for the good. And I'm also sad when I see how the news is delivered. I come from my news was all good news. I loved news you could use, news that would make a difference in your life. It's the reason I never made it in the real news world. I was always the perky hostess. And my kind of disappeared. And now it's more like we want hard news people who are going to look at the ugly side of all of this. And that keeps me awake at night. I worry about children who are not shown that part of the world. And that,
because we need to see both.
We do need to see, but we need to know what's out there so we can make a difference. But we need to know that the majority of people are kind and caring. The other thing that would keep me awake is if I ever... You're only as happy as your most unhappy child. So if one of my children have a concern or a worry, then I'm the one who stays awake at night. And when I bring it back up, like, oh no, Mom, I forgot about that. And here I have fretted over it because it was my child. So that's probably true of all mothers out there.
Well, since you have taught me so well over the years, I have something that I reserve for Southern Fort guests, and that is my virtual magic picnic basket. And so this is my dream meal scenario for you. With this basket, I can time travel. I can go back and ask anybody to make one more taste of something that you would really love to have. And I can cook a little bit, and I can also source really well. I would love to bring you some of your favorite things. They don't have to be a picnic. It can be all 100% carbs. Somebody a couple weeks ago did all meat. I was like, anything else? It was like, that's good.
Wonderful question.
And it's the opposite of a death row meal. So in other words, these are just some things that bring you life. And I know in a food aficionado life, that changes with the season. It changes with your travels. So what is it today? What can I put in that basket for you?
Well, I love desserts. And so
I think I remember that.
I might have done all desserts. I grew up with a mom who had a fabulous dessert every day. And part of my love for people is people came every day to our house and had dessert. But let's instead, and that's what you expected from me, all desserts. Let's do the unexpected.
Okay.
I will do the beginning to the end. Buttered crackers, buttered saltines. And the ones that are the best I've ever had are from Piedmont Driving Club in Atlanta. And I am doing my best to perfect that. And you might hear more about that on my website or on my videos or somewhere. I am going to figure that out.
Saltines are having a moment.
They are having a moment, and theirs are the best.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, that's in Atlanta. Okay. Then I have discovered, because they serve it at the Water and Flower restaurant in Tampa, Florida, Asian guacamole. Have you had Asian guacamole?
No.
Oh, it is so good. So I've been creating that. It has water chestnuts and ginger, and so that would be in our basket.
With buttered saltines.
With buttered saltines.
Sounds great.
Yes. And then we'll have some she crab soup, the best in the world. Now, I haven't been all over the world, but we're going to call it that. The best is from Quail Hollow Club in Charlotte. And I have had that in a lot of places, including there's some wonderful she crab soup in Charleston, and I know that. But somehow the one at Quail Hollow Club, your spoon could stand up straight in it without thick and good. And the crab is so good. So we've got she crab soup. Then I would have a filet. Notice that I'm doing this.
Yes. So we're down to the main course.
Main course. The main course would be a petite filet from Chops in Atlanta. But then we're going to go back to my childhood. And there is a steakhouse in Blacksburg, South Carolina, that my daddy would take us every week to Kelly's Steakhouse. You had to drive down a dirt road. Now, one of my grandparents had a farm in Blacksburg, so Blacksburg was home to us. But we would drive down this country road to Kelly's Steakhouse, and he had the best salads because they came from the South Carolina and North Carolina farms, fresh every day. And he had the best baked potato, the best loaded baked potato I have ever had. And all these years, and I have never been able to duplicate it. The loaded part was cream cheese and butter and sour cream and minced sweet onion. So good. Then I would want my bread. More vegetables. My daddy's Silver Queen corn that I was told I could go to the garden, stroll up there, pick it. But after I picked it, I had to run back as fast as I could because the time between picking it and putting it into the boiling water had to be as tiny as possible. And if I fell down, throw it away, go back and get some more. Bread. The cheese biscuits from Kudzu Bakery in Litchfield, Pawleys Island. So good. And then my mother's caramel layer cake.
Can't beat a caramel layer cake.
No. And hers, I would stand there and just wait and like 5 minutes after she fixed it. Her layers were really light and buttery and fluffy. And the caramel frosting was just perfect, not grainy, just perfect. And
which is kind of almost impossible to do.
But she did it. The caramel cake is in my book, and I will go ahead and confess that I've never been able to duplicate it. I have never been able to make it like she does. There's something she didn't tell me. She just knew how to do it. So there we are. Are you full?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm always hungry for more. Well, if people want to learn more about Barbara McKay and her world of entertaining and cooking and fashion, which we didn't even touch about today.
Yes, I've got no passion.
You can go to thesouthernfork.com. I'm going to have links there to her website as well as images so you can see the face behind the voice. If you like what you hear, there are close to 290 episodes in the archives waiting for you, each one of them an independent culinary conversation, one-on-one, and sometimes two-on-one, sometimes even three-on-one, with some of the best voices in the culinary South. And this is a voice that helped me get my voice. So
you have the best voice. You are awesome. I want to take lessons from you.
So I really, really appreciate you.
I am so deeply honored. I am loving every minute. Can we keep going? Let's do episode 2.
Thank you so much for your time today.
You are most welcome. I am honored.
Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. Well, it's July and I just had a trip to Charlotte, which included sitting with Barbara McKay, who you just listened to. And I really, really try to visit Charlotte because July is peak summer, which means it's peak bliss for North Carolina Piedmont food. This is the best time of year to eat in Charlotte. The tomatoes are in, the Silver Queen corn is sweet, zucchinis are growing almost in time-lapse photography style, and there's just access to fresh shrimp from the coast. It's just a wonderful time to eat out of the garden in the North Carolina Piedmont. If you've listened to the show or read my work at all, you probably know that I grew up with just a suburban garden in my parents' backyard, but it very much fueled my personal imagination and our family's plate. And one of my earliest memories is the fact that everyone around us had a garden, and there was an elderly couple across the street, and my mom would send me to go pick up vegetables or even sometimes cantaloupe from Mr. and Mrs. Johnson because they had more than they could use. Mr. Johnson had a huge garden in the back, and we would bring them things and they would trade back and forth. And if you're in the gardening world and the home garden world, you know that it's kind of a mixed blessing to receive a bag, a grocery bag full of zucchini from a friend this time of year. It's growing so fast you can't even keep up with it. And all of a sudden, you're gifted a bushel more of zucchini that you can turn into chow chow or pickles. I don't know. That's a whole nother show. But anyway, I just wanted you to know about all of that peak summer produce that is happening. And these days, I don't have a home garden. And so I make sure when I'm on the road that no matter where I am, I try to visit the local farmers markets. If I'm going to have a chance to cook at a friend's house or a family member's house, I definitely do. But even if I just want to go and look, I always want to see what's in season. So I wish you great seasonal eating. And if you can get to the Piedmont this time of year in North Carolina and you can deal with the heat and humidity, your reward will be some of the best vegetables out there. Thanks so much for listening, and I will be here next week.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?